Okay, it's time to do my second video in this new series that I'm doing where I round up the reviews of the recent releases of the previous month. So I have the first one down below, that's for January releases, and today we're going to go into February releases, and like the last video, I will have timestamps for each book. I will have any video reviews that I have found useful down below. I will have a Goodreads bookshelf that's not a playlist, but a shelf where you can go see these books for yourself in Goodreads, because I'm not going to go over synopses here. I'm trying to just give you the tropes and the tones and the vibes and the general impressions that I have gotten after going through Goodreads reviews and going through videos for, I believe this month we have 14 books. And I try to pull from a bunch of speculative genres and age ranges and diverse author groups. So we're going to have a lot of hyped books, and we're going to have a lot of books that no one's heard of. And I think it's going to be a fun mesh for that, because you'll get to hear the gossip about some things, but then also be like, oh, I have not heard of that book. Maybe it goes on my TBR. At least that's how I feel researching for these videos. So I think for this one, I'm going to go from has the most ratings on Goodreads to the least in pinball between those two things. And so no shocker here, the most ratings for a new release in February that I'm covering today was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. I have actually read this one as well. This book, basically, there were some people who are Sarah J. Maas fans who loved the story, found it just as engaging as everything else she's ever written, were blown away by the ending, and had a great time. They all had the time that me and a lot of my friends wish we had had. So I do have a very positive, or at least fun, reaction vlog video down below from Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany. You can see her spoiler thoughts in real time of how she took it in. But I also have a vlog of someone who had a 1-star time, and I'm sure you guys have all seen it because it was Reagan from Peruse Projects. For me and a couple of my friends who are Sarah J. Maas fans who liked the first book quite a bit, we had a lot of complaints. A lot of our complaints centered around why are none of the other major female characters getting point of view chapters? It's basically Bryce and every other alpha male that have been written. It was fun at first, but it's also just there are so many threads and it's so convoluted and the representation is so weird. But then it's also just the plot. The plot was a lot. It's, I think if you're having fun, the plot's perfectly serviceable. I think the plot is not, worse than normal for Sarah J. Maas. I think it's just more disjointed than normal. But I think for me, normally I can be distracted by the plot because I care about the character interactions, the friend group, the found family, the romance. And all of that was lacking for me and a couple of my friends in this experience. It's not the worst thing I've read by Sarah J. Maas, but I was really disappointed, and I'm not as thrilled by the ending. I'm not, upset about the ending, but I'm also just, whatever about it. So I'm curious to see what she does next, but I really feel for how many pages were in this book. I wish the focus was less on this really twisty bananas plot that bounces everywhere and more focused on the characters that we're forming connections to. And that's really just not where the focus of the book was. So I don't know. It's kind of, that's the range though. Usually from 3-star to 5-star on average, there is a few 1 to 2 stars out there. But for the most part, if you like Sarah J. Maas, this is similar to everything she's written before, just I feel clunkier. Now, the book with the least ratings, but the one that I am most excited about, actually might be putting it on my TBR, is 36 Streets. This is by an Australian author. It is cyberpunk sci-fi, and the reviews I have seen have me so interested. I have a video review down below. Highly recommend checking it out because that is a person who reads a lot of cyberpunk, and he's very aware of the flaws in cyberpunk, and basically what it sounds like based off his review is that this book pays homage and really is a cyberpunk sci-fi book, but without falling into classic pitfalls that are in that subgenre of sci-fi. I am so interested. The story itself takes place in Vietnam. I believe the author lived in Vietnam or still lives there, even though he's Australian. And the main character, I believe, is a lesbian, Australian adopted, but I believe Chinese character that lives in Vietnam now. And there's a virtual reality game, and I guess one of the creators of it is missing, and she's part of a gang and has been hired to find this person. And it sounds really fun, and I've been wanting to get into cyberpunk personally, but some of the classics in that genre just don't speak out to me. Things that I noticed that might help you if you've seen or watched or read Altered Carbon. It says that if you like Altered Carbon, you should definitely check this out. I think that's also a cyberpunk with a mystery to solve type of vibe. And a thing to look out for if this is something you don't like in your books, it's a violent book from the reviews that I saw. But I'm super interested. It hits a lot of like my things where I've been wanting to read for authors outside of the country, but also just like this is a genre of sci-fi I'm really I have no reads in. But I'm also a little nervous just because some people think that if you aren't used to cyberpunk and you don't crave the tropes that are normal in it, this might not work for you because it's very much a cyberpunk book. But I don't know. I'm interested in it. Next up, we have The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. Yes, not to be confused with The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, which I talked about in January's roundup, and that one's an adult. This one is a young adult fantasy, I believe standalone, or at least works as a standalone when you read it. It is based off Korean mythology, and I've seen generally positive reviews, but I've also seen some critiques on the plotting and the pacing of the story. I have a lot of those video reviews down below. I'm interested in it, but it also might not be my type of story. There have been comparisons to the movie Spirited Away, and I think what's important to note is that although it is about a character who goes to the spirit world, because that's kind of the part of this plot is they always sacrifice a woman to the sea god to try to get him to come back. I don't know why, I don't know the context. And I think she actually volunteers to do it to save her brother. I think that's like the start of the book. And then she ends up in a spirit world and interacts with a bunch of characters, and the plot goes from there. And if you've watched Spirited Away, a young character ends up in the spirit world, and the plot is very bounces all over the place, and you kind of just have to roll with it. A lot of character relationship developments happen really fast, and the plot changes, and from what I heard from the Rumi Digest, that's kind of the same type of jumping plot, meandering storytelling that you're going to get in this, which does intrigue me because I really do like Spirited Away, and that is a quirk of that movie that I don't dislike, but is definitely not what I'm used to when I'm consuming a story. So I think that's important to know going in, is that it might not have a pacing you are prepared for, but if you like the pacing of some of those styles of movies like Spirited Away, you might be better off with. Because that's where most of the complaints were in the plotting, and it's a young adult fantasy, and it has some romance elements that is probably, if you're sick of that in YA, it probably won't work for you here, but it did seem to not hinder anyone's enjoyment. Something else I want to highlight, and I really want to highlight this review because I just found this channel and it only has like 50 or 60 subscribers, and she did a vlog for this book, and she and many people have mentioned the whimsical writing and how this writing really transported them to this other land. So if that's like a feeling you want, you should definitely pick it up. But I believe in her words, it made her feel like she was out in a field of flowers and the wind's blowing. In terms of the writing. So in general, if that's the type of feel you want, if this is like a story you've been craving to consume, I think you should pick it up. I think it's going to be a great read, because something I saw across all the reviews is that it was a pretty quick, engaging experience. It's only a 330-page book, so probably worth your time. And like many books lately, stunning cover. So next, I wanted to mention this sci-fi debut, Bluebird. This has been marketed as Lesbian Gunslingers in Space, I believe, and I believe it's actually not marketed incorrectly, because we all know I got burned by Gideon the Ninth's tagline. And a lot of people just really loved the character groups and the adventure sci-fi of this story. It's just a nice LGBTQ-friendly space adventure. It has rebels, it has forbidden love, it has evil villains you'll love to hate, it has flawed heroines who also kick ass. These are a lot of things I saw in the reviews for it. I don't know if it scratches what I want from sci-fi, but if you've been craving a quality adventure sci-fi with this type of representation, it looks like the people who have read it have had a really fun time. Like, it's a fun, action-packed experience. So highly recommend checking it out, because like I said, it's one of those under the radar releases that not many people are talking about, and it seems like a really intriguing debut. We'll talk about one that's been on a lot of anticipated releases videos, and that's Dead Silence. I believe this is the one that's supposed to be like Titanic in space meets aliens. Like, it's supposed to be a sci-fi thriller horror story. And it's having a lot of mixed reviews. I have 2 reviews down below that are kind of 3.5 star range. Rachel from Shades of Orange says that they don't think this is definitely sci-fi horror in how they like horror, and it's more sci-fi psychological thriller. And if that had been how it's marketed, it might have been a different experience for her. And then I have people who do think it's horror, and they really like the beginning of the book, and then they don't really like the follow-through, and I don't know the specifics because apparently like it has to do with certain decisions the author makes with the plot, which would be inherently spoilery. But they really did like the atmosphere and the creep factor and like how the horror scene was set up at the start of this book, where you do have this group of people that discover kind of an abandoned spaceship and something happened to it out in space. And apparently the narrative framework is really cool. You start in present-ish day with our character after the events of the story, and you know something happened, and she's trying to remember what happened, but she's an unreliable narrator just because she can't quite remember, but also because of the nature of the horrific paranormal-ish things that may or may not have happened in the story. So I'm intrigued by it. It's kind of a bummer that people don't seem to think it sticks the landing by the end, but I think it's still worth picking up if you want. It's a pretty quick read. It's only 300 some pages, and if you've been craving sci-fi horror, I mean, it might work for you, because I think sometimes plot beats that authors choose can be pretty subjective from reader to reader if you're just having an engaging good time. I'm still waiting to hear from some of my friends who have read it. Like, I know Jessie May was planning to read it this month, and I know Tori Morrow started it this month, but have not seen their final thoughts yet, so I'm curious. Actually, Tori gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, which, if you know Tori, is basically a 4.5. So she ended up really liking it, and I'll have her initial thoughts video down below, because she did have thoughts on the first half of the book when she was reading it in a Currently Readings video. So those are my thoughts on that new sci-fi horror release, and now on to the next one, which is a republished book. So this is Redwood and Wildfire by Andrea Hairston, who wrote The Master of Poisons, I believe. And so this was first published, I believe, in 2012, based off all the Goodreads reviews I saw, and is being, I think that might have been indie published, and is now being traditionally published this year. The review I'm going to point you to for this book is Injiri from Onyx Pages, because she's just an amazing booktuber, amazing reviewer. If you have not checked out her channel, you really need to. But she reviewed this book closer to when it was first, I believe, released, or I think 2017, a while ago. And so this is a historical fiction with magical realism elements. So if you are looking for more historical fantasy, I don't think that's going to scratch that itch for you, although there is magic present. Magic is a part of everyday life in this book, but it has more of a magical realism vibe to it. This is also going to be an incredibly dark story. I do know Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany DNF'd this because of the content. I didn't read the entire Goodreads that she had for it because it had spoilers, and I am curious about picking up works by this author. I have also seen Goodreads review that compare this work to if Zolnir Hurston wrote a fantasy book. So I do know I have friends out there who really love that classic author's work. So if you wanted to see a work that feels like something like hers, this might be a good thing to pick up. I know the character work and the character relationships were something that Injiri really highlighted in her review, and that's something that makes me really interested to pick it up. It seems like it's a story with a lot of dark moments, but it's at its heart about hope and survival within community, and I'm actually always a sucker for those type of things. So I'm curious about this one. I want to read their more recent work first, The Masters of Poisons, to see how I vibe with their pacing, because both that and this have been slow burn stories. And Jiri points out that the first 100 pages are quite difficult for her to get through. So I'm curious, and I'm going to probably pick it up when I have a lot of patience and I really want to sink into a historical fiction. Another romance we have on this list is Hunt the Stars. This is a sci-fi romance. It just came out. This author, I believe, is known for the Polaris trilogy as well. I actually read this one, and I had a fun time, and a lot of the critiques for it are similar to my critiques, which is that the plot is really slow and meandering, and it doesn't really pick up to the last quarter, and I just also didn't really care about the plot. The initial premise is you have this human ship that has to form an alliance with this alien ship to solve basically what happened to this missing item, and they're going to be paid to do this, but these species, like alien and this human race, they are always at war, and so it's very much setting up the enemies to lovers trope, because these species can't stand each other, and both people used to be on the other sides of the war that used to be fought. And so a lot of this book is really quiet. Like, so if you like a cozy romance, I think that'll be okay. I just thought it spent too much time when we weren't in the romance and character development sections on, like, everyone's eating around a table together. We're all just chatting. We're going to this location to maybe find a clue. Like, it didn't feel like an engaging plot to me. That said, I personally loved all the sexual tension and the romantic build-up. I do think it's incredibly slow burn. If you do not want slow burn, this is incredibly slow burn before it gets to, like, the payoff at the end. And the alien race, I will say, has similar traits to Fae that I've read in Fae romances, which may be a positive or a negative for you. Like, if you like telepathic things, you know, in your romance, like, maybe pick this up. It's kind of cool. But I'm interested in other books in this series, but again, like, the plot wasn't amazing for me. Like, it was fine. It's just, I preferred the romance part of it, which tends to be what happens for me in sci-fi romance. But a lot of people had a lot of fun. But like I said, the main critiques were to do with the pacing of the plot. But if you don't mind slice of life in your romance, I think you won't have an issue whatsoever. This next one's a sequel, Moon Witch Spider King. I believe the first book was Red Leopard, Black Wolf, or something. I think I'm getting the colors mixed up. But this is by Marlon James. I have actually read the first book, so I was curious about reviews for the second book, because although I didn't love the first book, I didn't go into it with the right expectations. I did not know it was literary fantasy, so heads up. This is literary fantasy. I didn't know how dark it was going to be, because the series is incredibly graphic and dark and gruesome. And I was just not prepared for how difficult and dense the storytelling style would be. So I was curious about reviews for this one. It took a long time for this one to come out. I think the first book came out in 2016, and I believe there is one more book planned in the series. And in general, I am more intrigued to continue one day, but I do believe that this series knows what it is, and it just might have some qualities that won't work for me and other readers. This is an African-inspired epic fantasy tale that is very literary fiction, and it has a very dense, complicated, nonlinear storytelling, especially for the first book. I have heard the second book is a little bit more linear, and the second book actually takes place 200 or 300 years before the events of this first book and kind of catch up with the events, and it's from a different character's perspective. So that one's supposed to be, this newest one, a little more linear, but in general, it seems like both are just as cruel and dark and gruesome, because there's a lot of cruelty in this world. Like, I have read grimdark books that do not come close to the graphic gore that I have consumed in these works. And a lot of the mythology, a lot of the creatures are inspired by different regions of Africa, and it is really interesting. I just had issues in the first book connecting to characters, probably because I was just so confused. And one reviewer I saw that I'll have linked down below said that they had a better time when they always did the audiobook while reading it. And if I ever reread this series, I would go with the audiobook, because it does feel like a story that would be easier for me to digest if someone is telling to me instead of me reading it. I don't know if that makes sense, but some stories just, I think, perform better in an oral capacity than when you physically read them. At least for some people, probably me. So that's what I'll say about this one. I will say Laura from A Book Circus in a wrap-up said that they didn't like this book as much as the first one, but also isn't sure if it's because of the mental headspace that she picked it up in. I just think these books are incredibly dark and difficult to read, so you just have to, A, have the energy to do it, and B, have the stamina to keep up with the content of the material. The exact opposite of this is Legends and Lattes, which is a slice of life, low-stakes, cozy fantasy. I didn't plan for these to be next to each other, but I think it's a really awesome, thing to go from that really dark fantasy series to let's open a coffee shop. This is, I believe, an orc adventurer who decides, no, I just want to open a coffee shop, and it's about what it's like to start your own business in a found family. I have a couple reviews down below. I know as of filming this, Petrick just put up his review and really loved it. It's just cozy. It's just a good time. And apparently, according to Petrick, the author is going to be writing lots of standalones in this world. It's also important to note the author is the audiobook narrator for the Cradle series. So I believe this is his debut for writing, but he has experience as an audiobook narrator. And I did see some reviews that thought that that was a pro, because it seemed like the sentence structures were tight, because as an audiobook narrator, he has experience in what sentences sound good or something like that. That was just something I saw in someone's reviews. And I'm not gonna lie, when I need a cozy good time, I'll probably pick this up. It's not too long. I will say some critiques. There's a romance element in this book, and some people wish it was longer, but this is not a romance book, so it wasn't the focus of the story. It really is slice of life centered around, let's make this coffee shop. So if you need a cozy good time, if you are like, why is spring not here yet? Why is it still winter? Which is a lot of us in New England sometimes. Maybe pick this up. Also, I hear the food descriptions are A+. Now, I am as shocked as you guys that this has so few ratings, because honestly, there are 7 million review videos for the Justice of Kings. Not wrap-ups or anything, I didn't even get to touch those. Standalone review videos for Justice of Kings. There's so many, and I have a lot of them listed down below, all the ones that I watched. So, Justice of King is a very hyped Orbit release that not many people have read yet, is what I have gathered from Goodreads. And so I'll tell you a bit about the good and the bad. In general, a lot of people had a really good time, but I do have some reviews where people were very disappointed. This is a story about a magistrate who is law and order. This is a story where everyone discusses how good the themes of law and order and how government should work for the people, like that whole relationship. The themes of that are very present and strong, and it's interesting how they're explored in this book. If those are themes you want to explore, pick it up. I also have heard it's very isolated to this one town. You don't really get to see the whole world. The world building is very isolated to this one area, with the implication that you will get to expand and there's other things happening, and it's mainly following, I think, a murder mystery. I'm not sure if it's a murder, but something goes wrong in this town and people have to figure it out. The main character is also not the magistrate that I mentioned. It is kind of, I think, his apprentice, and it's written from the perspective of her looking back on her younger days and writing a memoir, so very Lady Trent. That actually intrigues me. Apparently it made a lot of people nervous. That's like a selling point for me, but I've read Lady Trent, and I love that. I will say some of the flaws that people mentioned in reviews where they were disappointed is, I believe her name's Helena, and they do not like how quickly this character's emotions progress in relationship to another character. And they didn't like a lot of her character decisions. So I feel like that's going to be a case-by-case basis for people. I feel like everyone just has different ways that they deal with character development between people, whether they think something is too fast or slow. I'm reading it next month, so I'm curious and nervous to see what I'll think, because I'm always nervous about low magic fantasy, because this is also low magic. There's very little magic. There's some cool sounding magic, but it's not a big part of it. And I am interested because people describe it as a setting similar to The Witcher, but the thing I like most about The Witcher cannot be in this book, and that would be the character of Geralt. So I'm hoping I like the characters and that the murder mystery engages me enough, because I also, like, that can be a struggle for me. So hopefully a lot of these tropes help you decide if you want to pick it up. This has, I think, appropriately set my expectations that, like, maybe this will only be a 4-star read for me just because of how many tropes it has against it. But if the writing works for me, it's going to be fantastic. So this one I'm cautiously optimistic about. But I think in general, it's a book that's starting something bigger in this world, but works as like a standalone. So I think that's always nice when you have a debut in a fantasy series that's like a solid standalone within its own right that can help you be grounded in the world on this scale. So I like the project of it. I'm interested. Next up, we're going to switch back to sci-fi. We're going to go to the Paradox Hotel, which I haven't actually seen that many reviews on, but I remember hearing about it in some people's anticipated releases videos, and it seems like it's going to be like one of those fun, almost like noir thriller type sci-fi books for people, like not dissimilar to Recursion or Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And in this, you basically have this hotel for time travel, and there's rules set up about it, and if you time travel too much, you can become unstuck from the timeline, and I think the book explains it better than I ever could, having not read the book. And our main character is unstuck and will not stop being at this hotel because otherwise they won't see, I guess, their long lost love who died in the past, but they can still see because they're unstuck. And so they're at this hotel long enough that their job is basically to, like, I don't know, it sounds like they solve mysteries, not necessarily murder mysteries, but like trying to figure out why things aren't like going right, who's breaking the rules and stuff like that. They have like this AI companion, and they seem like a very isolated lone wolf noir type character. So that seems interesting to me because it doesn't seem like, based off reviews, it falls into some of the noir tropes that I don't like. So that's kind of the premise, and apparently things are real wonky with the timeline, and I think the plot is very confusing, as is to be expected with time travel stories. But in general, people seem to have a fun time with it from what I could see on Goodreads reviews, but I do think that if you're someone like me who, like, kind of gets a little concerned when people use time travel as, like, their plot device, because, like, that can just go really poorly, I'm still nervous about it. But if I keep seeing pretty reasonable reviews, I might pick it up when I'm feeling like a sci-fi thriller or something like that. I don't know if it's really a thriller, but, you know, an action sci-fi book. Because sometimes I want that. And this book's only 330 pages. It has good LGBTQ representation. It seems like it could be a fun time. Another book I expected to have way higher ratings on Goodreads, like number of ratings based off the number of reviews I've watched, is Age of Ash, which is a book that in my booktube circles a bunch of people have been reading and reviewing and discussing. And it's, you know, pretty polarizing where everyone stands on it. I have everything from like 3 stars to 5 stars. You know, it's a little all over the place. The project of this, I believe, is a trilogy where each book takes place over the same time period from a different perspective in the city. And the city itself is a character within in its own right from the reviews that I have been seeing. The people who review this who love Daniel Abraham have read his Long Price Quartet, and I believe he has like a Dragon series, have said that this is very standard for a first book in a Daniel Abraham series, and they feel confident that he will pull it off by the end, and anything that is slow paced or slow building will make sense later on, because they're used to that in this author's writing style. They also very strongly want everyone to remember that this will not be The Expanse, because marketing keeps saying, this is the guy who helped write The Expanse, which is true, but also The Expanse's pacing is not like a standard Daniel Abraham book. So this is slower paced. The writing itself is something several people brought up in their reviews. Snow was brought up twice. Like when people were describing the writing, 2 different reviewers were like, you see like the snow fall from the sky or something like that. I'm like, okay. So if you like writing to help you get the sense of setting and atmosphere, it feels like this is something the author does quite a bit. Similarly to the Justice of Kings, I got the impression that this is going to be a more narrow, world-building, low magic system fantasy that is very slow burn, and the plot is meandering. So just know that going in, there was definitely a lot of opinions on who did and didn't like the pacing and the plot and how it went. And if you like to read stories with thieves, we got some thieves in this, and it takes place in the slums. So if you like that type of setting, that really down-to-earth, dirty part of cities, that's another thing that is featured in this book. I personally don't really actually know what the plot is because no one talked about it in any of the reviews, and I didn't look up a synopsis, so you can go see that down below. But some people said this works as a standalone. Other people says that they really don't know how they'll feel about this book till they have the entire trilogy. Regardless, if you like low magic, city-based fantasy, I think this might be worth picking up, because I did hear from like every review that the city is really well constructed and really interesting to explore. I think some of the complaints were just that they wanted to see more of the city, since this is so centered on like the slum area of the book. So that is Age of Ash. This next one's a horror that I saw the cover of and I was really interested in, and then I saw the reviews and now I low-key want to read it, and I don't read much horror, and that's Manhunt. Like, look at this cover. Like, what is this cover? It's amazing. So this is written by a trans author, and it has gore, body horror, it's post-apocalyptic, so just know all of those things going in. It may or may not involve consuming the bodily parts depicted on the book, okay? But when I tell you that when people review this book and the joy that they have, like, I want to read this book. I want to feel what these people are feeling. And I'll have 2 of those reviews down below. Like, they were speechless, and they couldn't, like, figure out what to say. A, because they didn't want to spoil the book, which, fair. But B, I just think that they ended up loving the characters and the plot so much more than they expected, which seems awesome. The premise of this world is that the virus that causes men or people with high testosterone levels to turn into these monsters, specifically we're following trans women in this world who have to keep their estrogen levels at a certain point so they don't become these monsters. And part of that process is hunting down these creatures and cutting off what is depicted in this image for scientific purposes and maybe eating. I don't know, but it sounds like the community in all of this is just like really stands out. Like, that was something I wasn't expecting from these reviews, is how strong the sense of community and networking and found family was. And I don't know, I'm just really curious. I kind of want to read it. I want to see if I can handle the gore. We'll find out, but it was one of those cases where, like, the energy that people put into the reviews, it's making me a little hype, even though this is not a hyped book. I mean, I think it's maybe hyped in horror spheres, but in, like, speculative fiction YouTube at large, not really, so. But I'm interested in it. It's pretty intriguing to me. And the last one we'll go over is a sequel or a prequel. Don't really know which one it technically is, but it's the second book written in this world, and that is Bitter by Koiki Emezi. This is in the same world as Pet, which is one that I have read. This takes place before the events of Pet through the eyes of Jam's mother, Bitter, hence the name Bitter. And so Lucille in Pet is this utopia. It is after we have gotten rid of all of the monsters. Bitter is the story where we have to fight the monsters. And it's a story about what does it mean to be an activist. It's a story about how to be an activist when you are not able-bodied. It has a lot of good discussion based off the reviews I've seen. I have also seen that this is not tonally the same as Pet, which kind of makes sense. Very different themes, but the actual writing style itself is very different from Pet. And one reviewer said it's more similar to actual traditional young adult writing style, whereas if you've read Pet, it kind of almost feels middle grade in its writing style. It's kind of hard to parse, but kind of something like that. And there were some complaints about the ending, maybe how much they could believe it or not. But in general, a lot of people who read this book liked it as much as Pet, maybe a little less, that they thought it was a good addition to this world of Lucille and thought it was a really good way to explore a lot of the themes that are presented on page. So it's definitely one that I want to pick up. I really liked Pet, so probably when I need an audiobook, I will be reaching for this because I think, I might be wrong, it might be the same narrator as Pet, and I loved him for that book. So that is this month's releases roundup. Per usual, let me know if there's anything you want me to include when I review these books in the future for future videos. Let me know any releases I might have missed because cannot be everywhere, and when I select the books I go over, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not just doing all of the hyped books to give like some of these other like hidden gems a chance. But if you want to leave an emoji, what books did we talk about? I mean, there were a lot of cities. Leave a city emoji for Age of Ash, Justice of Kings. I feel like we had a lot of good cities in here. I don't know. Just do that. Pretend everything is about cities and don't think about it too hard. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.